Back in 2023, Nova Scotia was up against a massive, historic wildfire crisis. The government's response was, well, it was swift, it was simple, and it was severe. A total ban on all travel and activities in the woods, province-wide. But was this an absolutely necessary move to keep people safe, or was it an overreach that went too far? To figure that out, we have to start with just how bad things really were.
Okay, so to really get why the government did what it did, you first have to wrap your head around the scale of this thing. 25,093. That's how many hectares burned across the province. To put that in perspective, that's like 47,000 American football fields, just gone up in smoke.
And we're not just talking about empty forests here. We're talking about people's lives. 211. That's the number of homes that were completely destroyed. That's 211 families who lost everything. Communities just torn apart.
And the cost? I mean, get this, $165 million. And that's just the insured damage from one of the fires. That staggering number really shows you the kind of financial pressure officials were under to make sure this never, ever happened again.
So yeah, those numbers, they really set the stage. The 2023 firestorm was an absolute crisis, and it created this huge, powerful demand for the government to do something decisive. The whole crisis really boiled down to two major fires. You had the Barrington Lake Fire, which was the biggest in the province's history. It just torched a massive chunk of the landscape. But then you had the Tantallon Fire. It was smaller, yeah, but it was almost more catastrophic because it ripped right through a packed suburban area.
And here's where it gets really interesting. What caused the largest fire in Nova Scotia's history? It wasn't some random act of nature like a lightning strike. Nope. The province charged a man for an illegal, unattended campfire, a specific, high-risk activity that was already against the law. And remember that detail, because it's going to be super important later.
So, with all this pressure mounting, the government came out with its big solution, a sweeping province-wide ban on all travel and activities in the woods. Simple and very, very drastic.
And the thinking behind it from Premier Tim Houston was pretty straightforward. It was built on this one powerful idea. People cause fires. So the easiest way to stop fires, just keep all the people out of the woods, period.
And this right here, this was their core justification. This one powerful statistic. 97% of wildfires in Nova Scotia are caused by humans. And on the surface, you know, that logic seems pretty hard to argue with.
But okay, that leads to the big question, right? If we peel back that big 97% number, what specific things are people doing that actually start these fires? Is a hiker walking on a trail really the same risk as someone lighting a bonfire?
And when you actually look at the province's own data, a whole different picture starts to take shape. The top causes are things you'd expect. Arson, illegal campfires, burning trash. You know, specific, high-risk, often illegal activities. But things like hiking or just walking in the woods, they don't even show up on the list.
And yet, the policy's response was this massive $25,000 fine that made absolutely no distinction. It basically said that the risk from someone just taking a walk was the same as the risk from someone lighting an illegal fire. And that right there is what experts call a policy evidence mismatch.
And this mismatch, this gap between the policy and the actual evidence, well, it had some pretty serious real-world consequences for the people and the economy of Nova Scotia.
For starters, think about tourism. It's a $3.5 billion a year industry in the province, and so much of that relies on Nova Scotia's image as this amazing outdoor playground. The ban put all of that at risk.
And it wasn't just about money. The social cost was huge too. The ban didn't just stop people from having fun, it messed up daily life. In some cases, it closed off safe ways for people to get to work, like this one commuter who said their safe bike trail was closed, forcing them onto dangerous roads.
So you've got the economic problems, you've got the social problems. But an even bigger hurdle was looming for this policy, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
See, in Canada, the government can't just limit your fundamental rights, like, say, the right for an outdoor guide to make a living. They can only do it if they can prove that limit is reasonable. And to prove it, they have to pass this really tough legal challenge called the Oakes test.
So how did the ban do? Well, step one, is preventing catastrophic fire an important goal? Yes,
Obviously, that's a clear pass. But after that, it starts to fall apart. Is the ban rationally connected to the real causes? That's questionable. And then it gets to the really big ones. Did it impair rights as little as possible? Total fail. Did the benefits outweigh the harm? Another fail. That minimal impairment part is especially key. The government has to prove it used the least drastic option available.
And that failure on minimal impairment is so critical because it turns out there are much better, less extreme options out there that are already being used successfully in other provinces.
Let's just take a quick look at Alberta, for example. Instead of Nova Scotia's simple on-or-off switch for the whole province, Alberta uses this smarter, tiered system. They can issue advisories or restrictions or full-on bans, and they can target them to specific regions based on real data. They ban the high-risk stuff, but they let low-risk recreation continue safely. It's a much more surgical approach.
So what this all points to is that a real, robust strategy isn't just about putting up a giant keep-out sign. It's a whole strategy with multiple pillars, targeted restrictions, helping communities become fire-safe, managing the forest proactively, and actually educating people about the real risks.
And at the end of the day, this whole thing goes beyond just the law. It's really an ethical question. There's this idea called the public trust doctrine, and it basically says the government is holding these public lands in trust for all of us. That means it has a duty to keep us safe, for sure, but it also has a duty to make sure we can access and enjoy those lands. The goal is to find a balance, not just to pick one duty over the other.
Ultimately, what the whole Nova Scotia woods ban really forces us to confront is this difficult question, one that's only going to get more urgent as we face more crises. How do we protect our collective safety without trampling on our individual rights and freedoms? How do we find that balance without having to sacrifice either one? And figuring that out, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges we face.